The silver ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning in 2387. They came silently, like metal clouds drifting through space. People around the world stopped what they were doing and looked up. Children pointed from school windows. Workers stepped out of their offices. Everyone knew this day would change everything. Dr. Sarah Chen was digging in the dirt when the news reached her. She worked as an archaeologist, someone who studied old things buried in the ground. Her team was working in Egypt, looking for ancient human settlements. When her assistant ran to her with a tablet showing the alien ships, Sarah's first thought was not about the aliens. She thought about the strange metal piece she had just found buried 10 feet underground. The piece was smooth and warm to the touch. It had symbols carved into it that looked almost familiar, but not quite. Sarah had been finding similar objects for months now. Each one was buried deeper than it should be. Each one was older than anything humans were supposed to have made. Above Earth, the alien ships arranged themselves in a perfect circle. They did not attack. They did not send messages. They just watched. Elder Kethvar stood on the bridge of his ship looking down at the blue planet below. He was tall and thin, with purple skin that shimmered in the ship's light. His people, the Zephyrians, had been traveling through space for thousands of years. They had met many species. Most were simple creatures who had just learned to make fire. Some were smart enough to build basic machines. Very few ever made it to space. The humans below looked promising but primitive. Kethvar watched their cities through his ship's sensors. The humans used crude metal vehicles that burned fuel and moved slowly along stone roads. They lived in small box-shaped buildings. Their technology seemed barely functional compared to Zephyrian energy systems. "Should we make contact?" asked his second-in-command, a younger Zephyrian named Veltar. Kethvar shook his head. "Not yet. Let us study them first. They appear to be in their early industrial phase. Perhaps they will be worthy of joining the Galactic Collective in a few hundred years." The Zephyrians had rules about contact with primitive species. They would watch and learn. If the species showed promise, they might be invited to join the great community of star-traveling peoples. If not, they would be left alone to develop or die out naturally. Down on Earth, governments panicked. Military forces prepared for war. Scientists tried to understand the alien technology. Religious leaders spoke of prophecies. But the aliens did nothing except watch. After 3 days, the alien ships moved to Earth's moon. They built a small research station there, a collection of crystal domes connected by glowing tubes. From Luna, they could study Earth without alarming the humans too much. Sarah Chen barely noticed the alien arrival. She was too busy with her discoveries. The strange metal pieces were appearing everywhere her team dug. Each dig site revealed more objects that should not exist. Tools made from metals that humans had only learned to create in the last 50 years. Carvings showing star maps that were perfectly accurate. Containers that still held unknown substances after being buried for thousands of years. "Dr. Chen," called her assistant, Marcus. He was a young man who loved mysteries as much as she did. "You need to see this." Marcus led her to the newest dig site. There, half buried in sand that had not been disturbed for millennia, was a metal plate the size of a dinner table. The symbols on it were clearer than any they had found before. Sarah knelt beside it and traced the symbols with her finger. Something strange happened when she touched the plate. For just a moment, the symbols seemed to glow. For just a moment, Sarah felt like she almost understood what they meant. It was like remembering a dream that slips away when you try to catch it. "Did you see that?" she asked Marcus. "See what?" Sarah looked again. The plate was just metal and symbols. Nothing more. But the feeling remained. The feeling that these symbols were trying to tell her something important. Meanwhile, on Luna, Elder Kethvar was having problems of his own. The Zephyrian scanning equipment kept malfunctioning. Their energy sensors, which could detect the heat from a single candle from orbit, were giving impossible readings. Sometimes they showed normal human activity. Sometimes they showed energy signatures that made no sense. "The equipment must be damaged," said Veltar. "Perhaps the journey here affected our systems." But Kethvar was not so sure. He had been studying space-traveling species for most of his long life. He had learned to trust his instincts. Something about the humans felt different. When he watched their cities, he sometimes caught glimpses of structures that seemed too advanced. When he scanned their technology, he occasionally detected energy patterns that belonged to far more developed civilizations. The humans themselves seemed unaware of these anomalies. They went about their daily lives, working in their simple jobs, driving their primitive vehicles, living in their basic homes. But sometimes, when the sensors focused on certain individuals, the readings went wild. Dr. Sarah Chen was one of those individuals. Kethvar began keeping special watch on the archaeologist. She spent her days digging in Earth's desert, looking for old human artifacts, normal behavior for a primitive species trying to understand its own history. But the energy readings around her dig sites were anything but normal. One day, Kethvar watched as Sarah uncovered another metal plate. The moment her hands touched it, every sensor on his ship lit up like stars. Energy readings spiked to levels that should have been impossible for anything on that primitive planet. Then just as quickly, everything returned to normal. "Did you record that?" Kethvar asked his technician. "Record what, Elder?" "I show no unusual activity." Kethvar stared at his displays. According to the instruments, nothing had happened. But he had seen it with his own eyes. Whatever was happening on Earth, it was beyond their current understanding. As weeks passed, Sarah's team made more discoveries. They found tools buried in layers of Earth that were millions of years old. They found star charts carved in stone that showed celestial positions from ages past. They found containers made from materials that Earth's best scientists could not identify. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Deep in an Egyptian tomb that had never been opened, Sarah's team found a room filled with metal plates covered in symbols. The plates were arranged in a pattern that reminded Sarah of a library or database. When she entered the room, she felt the same strange recognition she had experienced before, but stronger. As she moved closer to examine the plates, something incredible happened. The symbols began to glow with soft blue light. One by one, the plates activated, showing moving pictures in the air above them. Pictures of space, pictures of ships traveling between stars, pictures of civilizations rising and falling across the galaxy. And in the center of it all, pictures of humans, but not humans as they were now. These humans wore clothing made of light. They traveled in ships that moved faster than thought. They built cities that floated in space like jewels. Sarah stared at the images until they faded away. When the room returned to darkness, she sat down heavily on the stone floor. Either she was going crazy or everything humanity thought it knew about its own history was wrong. Above, Elder Kethvar noticed that his sensors had detected another massive energy spike. This time it lasted for nearly an hour, and this time he was certain that something was awakening on the world below, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. The discovery in Egypt was just the beginning. Within days of Sarah's find, archaeological teams around the world began reporting similar discoveries. Ancient chambers filled with glowing plates, metal artifacts that responded to human touch, star maps that showed impossible detail. Dr. James Rodriguez was working on Mars when his team made their breakthrough. The red planet had been colonized by humans 50 years earlier, with small research stations scattered across its surface. James led the archaeological survey team, looking for signs of ancient life. What he found was something else entirely. "This can't be right," James muttered, staring at his scanner readings. His team was exploring a canyon in the Valles Marineris when they detected artificial structures buried under centuries of dust and rock. The structures were huge, larger than anything humans had ever built. As they cleared away the covering, they revealed buildings made from the same strange metal that Sarah had found in Egypt. But these buildings were clearly not Egyptian. They were not human in any style that anyone recognized. Yet when humans touched the walls, they came alive with light and sound. Maria Santos, James's assistant, was the first to make contact with the structures. She placed her hand on what looked like a control panel, and suddenly the air filled with three-dimensional images, ships flying through space, planets being transformed from dead rock into gardens, civilizations spanning entire star systems. "James, you need to see this," Maria called. The images showed creatures that looked almost human, but not quite. They were taller, their features more refined. They wore clothes that seemed to be made of controlled energy. They commanded technology that made current human achievements look like children's toys. But the most shocking part was what the images showed these beings doing. They were seeding planets with life. They were guiding the development of younger species. They were building a vast network of civilizations across the galaxy, and in the final images, they were deliberately abandoning it all. Meanwhile, on Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, another team was making similar discoveries. The station there was smaller, run by Dr. Yuki Tanaka and her research crew. They had been drilling through the ice to study the ocean below when their equipment detected something impossible. There are structures under the ice, Yuki reported to Earth. Massive structures. They're not natural formations. Someone built them. The structures on Europa were different from those on Mars. While the Mars buildings seemed designed for creatures who lived on land, the Europa structures were clearly meant for an ocean environment. But when human divers reached them, the same thing happened. Touch activated ancient systems. Lights came on. Images appeared. The story the images told was always the same. An ancient human civilization that had reached heights of development beyond current imagination. A people who had spread across the galaxy, nurturing younger species and building wonders that spanned star systems. Dr. Sarah Chen received reports from all the sites. As the lead coordinator for what was being called the Ancient Human Project, she tried to make sense of the evidence. Every discovery pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Humans were not a young species taking their first steps into space. They were an old species returning to heights they had reached before. But if this is true, Sarah said during a video conference with the other team leaders, what happened to them? Why did they abandon their civilization? Why did humanity start over as primitive people living in caves? Nobody had answers. But the evidence kept growing. On Luna, Elder Kethvar was asking similar questions. His surveillance of Earth had revealed the archaeological discoveries. The energy readings from the dig sites were off the charts. His equipment was detecting power sources that should not exist on a primitive world. Elder, said Veltar, I've been analyzing the energy signatures from the human dig sites. They match patterns in our own historical databases. What kind of patterns? References to the builders. The ancient race that our own legends say prepared the galaxy for spacefaring civilizations. The ones who disappeared long before our species reached the stars. Kethvar felt something cold move through his body. The builders were myth, legend. Every spacefaring species had stories about them. The mysterious people who had seeded worlds and guided evolution. The ones who had built the ancient structures found on dead worlds throughout the galaxy. Structures that even the most advanced species could not fully understand. Show me the comparison data, Kethvar ordered. The information appeared on his screen. Energy patterns from Earth matched exactly with readings taken from builder ruins scattered across dozens of worlds. The mathematical signatures were identical. The technological fingerprints were the same. This is impossible, Kethvar whispered. The humans are primitive. We have observed them. They barely understand their own planet, let alone the galaxy. But the evidence was clear. Somehow, the primitive humans of Earth were connected to the ancient builders. More than connected. If the data was correct, they were the same species. Back on Earth, Sarah Chen was having her own revelation. She had returned to the chamber in Egypt, spending days studying the metal plates and their images. Each time she entered the room, more plates activated. Each time she understood a little more. The images were not just pictures. They were memories. Somehow the plates contained the actual experiences of the people who had made them. When Sarah touched them, she could feel echoes of thoughts and emotions from long ago. The memories told a story of incredible achievement and terrible loss. The ancient humans had indeed built a galactic civilization. They had possessed technology that could reshape matter at the atomic level. They could travel instantly between stars. They could manipulate time itself, but power had corrupted them. They had become arrogant. They had begun to see themselves as gods rather than gardeners. Wars had broken out between different human factions. Entire star systems had been destroyed in conflicts that lasted for millennia. Finally, a group of humans had made a desperate choice. Rather than let their species destroy the galaxy, they had abandoned their technology and started over. They had hidden their achievements and returned to a simple life on Earth, hoping that future generations would learn from their mistakes. The plates are sending signals, Marcus reported. He had been monitoring the chamber's energy output. Every time you activate them, they're transmitting data somewhere. Where? I'm not sure, but the signal is strong. Strong enough to reach other star systems. Sarah felt a chill. If the plates were sending signals into space, someone might be listening. Someone might be coming to investigate. On Mars, Dr. Rodriguez was making his own discovery about the signals. The structures on Mars were not just ruins. They were active systems that had been waiting for human contact. As his team explored deeper into the complex, they found what appeared to be a control center. It's like a computer, Maria observed. But not like any computer we know. It's responding to our presence, learning from us. The system began showing them star maps, not current maps, but maps showing how the galaxy had looked millions of years ago. Human settlements were marked on thousands of worlds. Trade routes connected distant stars. The entire galaxy had been organized and managed by human administrators. Look at this, James called from another console. The screen he was studying showed a list of species. Hundreds of different alien races with detailed information about each one. It's a catalog, he realized. The humans were keeping track of every intelligent species in the galaxy. They were monitoring their development, guiding their evolution. The implications were staggering. The current galactic community, the civilization that included the Zephyrians and dozens of other spacefaring species, had not developed naturally. They had been carefully cultivated by ancient humans. Dr. Tanaka on Europa was reaching similar conclusions. The ocean structures there contained biological laboratories where new life forms had been designed and tested. The humans had not just found life in the galaxy. They had created much of it. We need to contact the other sites, Sarah told her team. This is bigger than we thought. The aliens watching us from Luna need to know what we've found. But before she could act, the chamber around her began to change. The walls, which had been simple metal before, became transparent. Through them, Sarah could see space. Not the space around Earth, but space as it had been millions of years ago. Stars blazed with different colors. Planets hung in positions they no longer occupied. And everywhere, human ships moved like schools of fish through the cosmic ocean. In the center of the vision, Sarah saw Earth, but not the Earth she knew. This Earth blazed with artificial lights. Structures that reached into space surrounded the planet like a shell. The moon was covered with cities that sparkled like jewels. And standing in the center of the largest city on Earth was a figure that looked exactly like Sarah herself. As she watched, the figure turned and looked directly at her across the millions of years that separated them. The ancient human smiled sadly and raised one hand in greeting. Then the vision faded, and Sarah was alone in a dark chamber with only the glowing plates for company. But now she understood. The plates were not just showing her the past. They were preparing her for what was coming next. The awakening had begun. The signal reached every human archaeological site at the same moment. On Earth, on Mars, on Europa, and in dozens of smaller research stations scattered throughout the solar system, ancient systems came online. Technology that had been sleeping for millions of years suddenly awakened. Dr. Sarah Chen was still in the Egyptian chamber when it happened. The metal plates that had shown her glimpses of the past suddenly blazed with light. The entire room filled with a warm golden glow. And inside that glow, Sarah heard voices. Not voices speaking to her ears, but voices speaking directly to her mind. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All saying the same thing in a language she had never learned but somehow understood perfectly. Welcome home, children. Welcome back to the truth. On Mars, Dr. Rodriguez felt the same awakening. The control center his team had discovered was fully active now. Screens showed detailed readouts from across the galaxy, star maps updated in real time, communication channels open to distant worlds. James, Maria whispered, look at this. She was pointing at a display that showed the solar system, but it was not the solar system as they knew it. This version had structures around every planet. Stations orbited in the asteroid belt. Ships moved between worlds like a vast transportation network. It's not showing us what is, James realized. It's showing us what was, and maybe what could be again. On Europa, Dr. Tanaka's team was experiencing something even more dramatic. The ocean structures were not just coming online. They were manufacturing something. The water around them filled with tiny machines, each no bigger than a grain of sand. The machines swarmed through the ocean, building new structures at incredible speed. They're not just machines, Yuki observed, watching through her submersible's cameras. They're following patterns, like they're rebuilding something that used to be here. But the most dramatic changes were happening on Earth itself. In hidden locations around the planet, buried systems activated. Structures rose from beneath the sea. Ancient satellites in orbit came back to life. Energy grids that had been dormant for eons began to pulse with power. Elder Kethvar watched it all from his station on Luna. His sensors were overwhelmed by the energy readings. His communication systems were flooded with signals that his equipment could not decode. And slowly, a terrible understanding began to grow in his mind. Veltar, he said quietly, access our historical databases. Search for any references to the Builder civilization. Cross-reference with the energy signatures we're detecting from Earth. The younger Zephyrian worked quickly at his console. As the data appeared on their screens, both aliens fell silent. The energy signatures were identical. The construction patterns matched perfectly. Even the mathematical constants were the same. There was no doubt possible. The humans were the builders. But Elder, Veltar protested, that's impossible. The builders vanished millions of years ago. They were ancient when our species was still learning to make tools. The humans are primitive. We've studied them. They can barely manage spaceflight to their own moon. Kethvar stared at the data. Everything his species had believed about galactic history was wrong. The Zephyrians had built their civilization on the foundations left by the builders. Their technology, their knowledge of space travel, even their understanding of physics came from studying builder ruins. And now those ruins were waking up, responding to their original creators. Send a message to the collective command, Kethvar ordered. Priority 1. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. On Earth, the awakening was spreading. Sarah Chen walked out of the Egyptian chamber to find the entire archaeological site transformed. Structures that had been buried for millennia were rising from the sand. Buildings made of the same strange metal as the plates stretched toward the sky. Other members of her team stood transfixed, staring at the emerging city. But Sarah noticed something else. Her team members looked different. They stood straighter. Their eyes were brighter, and when they spoke, their voices carried knowledge they had not possessed before. Dr. Chen, Marcus said, but his voice sounded older, wiser. We remember now. We remember what we were. What do you mean? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. The memories are awakening, Marcus explained. Every human carries the genetic memory of our species' true history. The archaeological sites are acting as triggers, unlocking what has been sleeping in our DNA for millions of years. Around the world, the same thing was happening. Humans near the awakening sites began to remember, not with their conscious minds but with something deeper. Genetic memories passed down through countless generations. Memories of a time when humanity had ruled the stars. Dr. Rodriguez on Mars felt it happening to him. As he watched the ancient control systems come online, knowledge flowed into his mind. He suddenly understood how to operate technology that should have been beyond human comprehension. He could read displays written in languages that had never been taught on Earth. He could control systems that bent the laws of physics. Maria, he said, I know how to fly their ships. What ships? She asked. Rodriguez pointed to a new display that had just activated. It showed a vast hangar buried deep beneath the Martian surface. Inside the hangar were dozens of vessels unlike anything humanity had ever built. Ships that could travel between stars in days rather than years. Ships that could reshape matter with thought. Ships that could carry entire populations to new worlds. Our ships? Rodriguez corrected himself. Ships we built long ago and left waiting for our return. The awakening was not limited to the archaeological sites. Across Earth, humans began experiencing strange dreams and sudden insights. Artists found themselves creating works that seemed to come from another time. Scientists made breakthrough discoveries that they could not explain. Musicians composed symphonies that sounded like nothing from Earth, yet felt hauntingly familiar. Dr. Helen Foster was working in her laboratory in Geneva when the awakening reached her. She was a quantum physicist, studying the fundamental forces that held the universe together. When the wave of genetic memory hit her, she suddenly understood things about reality that human science had never imagined. Time is not linear, she whispered to herself, staring at equations that were writing themselves on her computer screen. Space is not fixed. Matter and energy are just different expressions of consciousness. The equations showed her how ancient humans had manipulated the fabric of reality itself, how they had created pocket dimensions for storage, how they had traveled not through space but around it, how they had built machines that thought and felt and dreamed. Meanwhile, on Luna, Elder Kethvar was facing a crisis that threatened everything his species believed. The collective command had responded to his message by sending a fleet of warships. They were coming to investigate the situation on Earth and, if necessary, eliminate the threat. They don't understand, Kethvar told Veltar. The humans are not a threat to be eliminated. They are our creators. Everything we are, everything we have achieved came from them. But the collective command saw only a primitive species that was somehow activating builder technology. They interpreted this as theft or contamination. The response fleet was equipped with planet-killing weapons. Elder, the humans are trying to communicate with us, Veltar reported. We're receiving signals from their awakening sites. Put them through. Sarah Chen's face appeared on their screen. But she looked different than she had just days before. Her eyes held depths of knowledge that seemed to span eons. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded star fleets. Greetings, children of Zephyr, she said, using the ancient name for the Zephyrian homeworld. We meet again after long separation. You remember us? Kethavar asked, amazed. We remember everything, Sarah replied. We remember guiding your species from primitive hunters to star travelers. We remember teaching you to build your first ships. We remember watching with pride as you took your place among the galactic civilizations. But why did you abandon us? Why did the builders disappear? Sarah's expression grew sad. Because we became too proud. Too powerful. We began to see ourselves as gods rather than gardeners. We fought wars that destroyed entire star systems. We created weapons that could unravel the fabric of space itself. In the end, we chose to start over rather than destroy everything we had built. The communication channel filled with static as more human sites came online. Kethvar could see similar conversations happening with other species throughout the galaxy. Ancient ruins on 100 worlds were awakening. Genetic memories were stirring in species that had been guided by humans millions of years ago. The collective fleet is 3 days away, Veltar warned. Sarah nodded. We know, we can sense their approach. But Kethavar, you must understand something. We did not awaken by accident. The galaxy is facing a crisis that requires our return. Something is coming from beyond the edge of known space, something that threatens all life. Before Kethavar could ask what she meant, their sensors detected something impossible. Ships were rising from beneath the surface of every planet in the solar system. Not human ships as they knew them, but vessels that seemed to be made of crystallized light, ships that moved without engines and turned space itself into their highway. The human fleet was awakening, and it was larger than the combined forces of every species in the Captain Maria Torres had been commanding Earth's deep space research vessel Endeavour. When the awakening began, she was exploring the outer edges of the solar system, mapping asteroids and searching for new mineral deposits. When the ancient signals reached her ship, everything changed. At first, it was just dreams. Strange visions of flying between stars in ships made of pure thought. Images of worlds being born under the guidance of beings who looked human, but possessed capabilities far beyond anything Maria had ever imagined. Then the dreams became memories, and the memories became knowledge. Maria found herself understanding her ship's controls in ways she never had before. She could sense the quantum fields that held matter together. She could feel the gravitational currents that flowed between planets. And deep in her mind, she remembered flying vessels that could reshape reality with the pilot's will. Captain, her science officer, Dr. Sam Williams, called from his station. I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of Titan. How massive? Maria asked, though part of her already knew what they would find. Off the scale. It's like someone just turned on a small star. Maria set course for Titan, Jupiter's largest moon. As they approached, their sensors revealed something impossible. Beneath the moon's icy surface, enormous structures were activating. Buildings that dwarfed entire cities on Earth were rising from installations that had been hidden for millions of years. Take us down, Maria ordered. The landing was unlike anything she had ever experienced. As their ship approached the awakening facility, it began responding to systems that should not have existed. Their engines harmonized with energy fields generated by the ancient installation. Their navigation computer started receiving course corrections from sources it could not identify. They landed in a hangar that expanded to accommodate their ship perfectly. As Maria and her team stepped outside, lights came on around them. The air filled with a warm, breathable atmosphere that seemed to be created just for their arrival. Welcome back, Commander Torres, a voice said. Maria spun around, looking for the speaker, but found no one. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I'm Captain Torres, she corrected automatically. No, the voice replied gently. You are Commander Torres of the Stellar Engineering Corps. You supervise the construction of terraforming installations throughout the Centauri sector. You are beginning to remember. And she was. Memories flooded back like water through a broken dam. She remembered standing on the bridge of a ship that could move faster than light. She remembered watching new worlds bloom with life under her guidance. She remembered the great projects that had shaped the galaxy, but she also remembered the wars, the terrible conflicts that had torn human civilization apart, the weapons that had shattered planets and broken the laws of physics themselves. Dr. Williams approached a control panel that had appeared from nowhere. When he touched it, his eyes went wide with sudden knowledge. "The quantum manipulation protocols," he whispered. "I remember how to restructure matter at the subatomic level. I remember how to fold space and create pocket universes." Around them, the facility continued to awaken. Machines that had been dormant for eons came online. Manufacturing systems began producing tools and devices that surpassed anything in current human technology. Transportation tubes activated, connecting their location to similar facilities throughout the solar system. "Why now?" Maria asked the voice. "Why are we remembering now?" "Because it is time," the voice replied. "The exile is ending. The galaxy faces a threat that requires our return." A holographic display materialized in front of them. It showed a map of known space, with thousands of civilizations marked by different colored lights. At the edge of the map, darkness was spreading. Entire star systems were going dark. "The Devourers have found this galaxy," the voice explained. "They consumed our original home beyond the galactic rim. We fled here millions of years ago and seeded new life, hoping to build civilizations strong enough to resist them. But now they have followed us." Maria studied the display. The darkness was moving in a pattern, systematically eliminating star systems in its path. At its current rate of progress, it would reach the core systems within decades. "How do we stop them?" Dr. Williams asked. "The same way we fought them before," the voice answered. "By becoming what we once were. But hopefully with wisdom we lacked the first time." The facility showed them more than just technology. It showed them the true scope of what humanity had once achieved. Star systems reorganized to optimize life. Planets moved to better orbits. Entire species guided from primitive origins to spacefaring civilizations. The ancient humans had not just built a galactic empire. They had become custodians of life itself. "We tried to play God," Maria realized, her awakening memories filling in the terrible details. "We thought we knew what was best for everyone." "Yes," the voice agreed sadly. "Power corrupted us. We began to see other species as children who needed our constant guidance. We made decisions for them instead of helping them make their own choices. Some species rebelled. Wars broke out. In trying to protect our creation, we nearly destroyed it." Dr. Williams was exploring deeper into the facility. He found libraries of information stored in crystalline matrices. The data was vast beyond comprehension, the accumulated knowledge of millions of years of galactic civilization. "There's so much here," he called to Maria. "Scientific discoveries, cultural records, artistic achievements from thousands of worlds. It's like the greatest treasure house in the galaxy." But the most important discovery was yet to come. In the deepest part of the facility, they found the construction bays. Massive spaces where ships were built, not the crude metal vessels that current humanity used, but craft that seemed to be carved from crystallized starlight. "The fleet is awakening," the voice told them. "Ships that have waited millions of years for their crews to return. Vessels that can remake matter, manipulate time, and travel instantly between any 2 points in space." Maria approached the nearest ship. It was beautiful in a way that brought tears to her eyes, organic curves that seemed to flow like water, surfaces that shifted between transparent and opaque as she watched. When she placed her hand on what she thought might be a door, the entire ship responded. Knowledge flooded into her mind. Not just how to pilot the ship, but how to become one with it. The vessel was not just a machine. It was a living partnership between human consciousness and technology that transcended the boundary between organic and artificial. "I remember building ships like this," she whispered. "I remember the joy of creating something that was both art and science." But she also remembered the horror of watching similar ships turned into weapons of destruction. The battles that had raged across star systems, the civilizations that had been caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen was experiencing her own awakening. The facility in Egypt had revealed itself to be just one node in a global network. Ancient installations were coming online on every continent. In Antarctica, cities emerged from beneath miles of ice. In the depths of the ocean, Manufacturing centers began producing materials that could only be created in the hearts of stars. Sarah found herself able to communicate directly with the awakening systems, not through computers or interfaces, but through thought itself. The technology responded to human consciousness as if it were alive. We were not just advanced, she realized. We were something completely different. We merged with our technology so completely that the distinction between human and machine became meaningless. The awakening was spreading to humans around the world. Not everyone was affected equally. Some people remembered fragments. Others recalled entire lifetimes from the ancient era. A few, like Sarah and Maria, seemed to have been key figures in the original civilization. Dr. James Rodriguez on Mars was one of the few who remembered the wars in complete detail. As the Martian facilities awakened around him, he relived the terrible decision to abandon their technology and start over. We could have fought the corruption, he told his team. We could have found another way. But we were afraid of what we had become, afraid of what we might do if we continued down that path. The Martian installations were revealing the true scope of human engineering. The planet's entire core had been replaced with a massive energy generator. The red surface was just camouflage hiding a world-sized machine that could manufacture anything from base elements. We turned Mars into a factory, Rodriguez remembered. We used it to build the tools needed to terraform entire star systems. We were so proud of our ability to reshape worlds that we forgot to ask whether we should. On Europa, Dr. Tanaka was discovering that the ocean moon had been humanity's laboratory for creating new forms of life. The waters teemed with artificial organisms designed to terraform hostile worlds. Some of the creatures were beautiful beyond description. Others were so alien that human minds could barely process their existence. We played with the fundamental forces of evolution, she realized. We created species that could survive in any environment. We thought we were improving on nature, but the awakening memories also showed the disasters. Artificial species that had evolved beyond the collective fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, expecting to find a primitive world defended by crude technology. Instead, they found something that challenged every assumption they had ever made about power and civilization. Admiral Rebecca Stone stood on the bridge of the newly awakened human flagship, watching the alien fleet approach. The ship around her was alive in ways that modern engineering had never imagined. Its hull shifted and flowed like liquid metal, adapting to threats before they could manifest. Its weapons could reshape matter at the quantum level, or simply remove enemy vessels from existence entirely. Rebecca remembered commanding fleets like this before. In her awakened memories, she had been Admiral Stone of the Third Galactic Fleet, responsible for protecting human space during the final wars. She remembered the terrible power these ships possessed. She remembered how easy it had been to use that power to solve problems with force. But she also remembered why humanity had chosen to abandon such weapons. "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, Commander Chen, "the alien fleet is taking defensive positions. Their communications indicate they believe we're a threat to galactic stability." Rebecca studied the approaching ships. They were impressive by current galactic standards. Energy shields, plasma weapons faster than light drives. The Zephyrians and their allies had built a respectable civilization from the foundations humanity had left behind. But compared to what the human fleet could do, they might as well be throwing rocks. "They have every right to be afraid," Rebecca said quietly. "In our arrogance, we once used fleets like this to impose our will on species that disagreed with us. We told ourselves we were bringing order and peace. Really, we were just afraid of losing control." On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen was experiencing a different kind of awakening. As the planetary systems came online, she found herself connected to a network of consciousness that spanned the solar system. Every awakened human, every activated facility, every emerging ship was part of a vast collective intelligence. But this was not the cold, mechanical unity of a computer network. It was something warmer, more organic. Each individual mind remained distinct while sharing in the greater whole. Sarah could feel the thoughts and memories of humans across the solar system. But she was still herself. "It's like a symphony," she explained to Marcus, who had remained at her side throughout the awakening. Every instrument playing its own part, but creating something beautiful together. Through the network, Sarah could sense the approaching crisis. The collective fleet was preparing to attack. Their leaders believed humanity had somehow stolen builder technology and posed a threat to galactic order. They could not conceive that the primitive species they had been studying was actually their ancient creators. But Sarah could also sense something else. Beyond the edge of the galaxy, darkness was spreading. The devourers that had driven humanity from their original home were finally crossing the void. They consumed entire star systems, turning matter and energy into nothing more than expanding emptiness. The awakened humans had perhaps decades before that darkness reached populated space. The galaxy needed to be united and prepared, but first they had to prevent the collective fleet from starting a war that would weaken everyone. Elder HFY sat in his shuttle as it approached Earth, his mind reeling from what he had witnessed. The planet below bore no resemblance to the primitive world his people had been studying. Cities of crystallized light covered every continent. Orbital structures surrounded the globe like a vast mechanical flower. Ships that seemed to be made of controlled starlight moved between Earth and its moon. "How did we miss this?" Veltar whispered beside him. "How did our sensors not detect any of this?" HFY understood now. They didn't want us to see it. The humans have technology that can hide entire civilizations. They could have revealed themselves at any time. The question is why they chose to do it now. Their shuttle was guided to a landing platform that materialized beneath them as they approached. As they stepped out, they found themselves facing a figure that looked human, but carried herself with the bearing of someone who had commanded star fleets. "Welcome to Earth." "Elder HFY," Sarah Chen said. "I am Sarah, but I am also something more. I am the collective voice of humanity's awakened consciousness." "Are you going to destroy our fleet?" HFY asked directly. Sarah looked sad. "We could. In our arrogance, we once would have. But we have learned something during our long exile. Power without wisdom is the path to destruction. We hope to convince your people to join us in facing a greater threat, not to conquer them." She gestured for him to follow her. They walked through corridors that seemed to be carved from light itself. Windows showed views of Earth being transformed. Oceans that had been blue were now silver with floating cities. Continents sprouted towers that reached into space. "This is what we were," Sarah explained. "This is the power we once wielded carelessly. We could reshape planets with thought. We could move stars to better positions. We could create life or destroy it with equal ease." "Then why did you stop?" HFY asked. "Why did you abandon your technology and pretend to be primitive?" Sarah led him to a room that existed in several dimensions at once. The walls showed images from humanity's past. Glorious cities spanning multiple star systems, fleets of ships that could crack planets, weapons that could unravel the fabric of space itself. But they also showed the wars. Species that had rebelled against human guidance, civilizations destroyed in conflicts that spanned centuries, entire regions of space left empty and lifeless. "We became convinced that we knew what was best for everyone," Sarah said. "We made decisions for species that should have been allowed to choose their own paths. When they resisted, we used force to maintain order. The more we controlled, the more we needed to control." The images showed the final war, human factions fighting each other with weapons that threatened the survival of the galaxy itself, planet-killing devices, reality-breaking bombs, time itself being weaponized in conflicts that had no possible victors. "Some of us realized what we had become," Sarah continued. "We were not gardeners helping life flourish. We were tyrants imposing our will on the universe. So we made a choice that seemed impossible. We abandoned our power and started over." HFY stared at the images of destruction. His own people's legends spoke of the great wars that had ended the Builder era. But they had always assumed the Builders had been destroyed by outside forces, not by their own conflicts. The exile was not a punishment, he realized. It was a choice. You chose to give up godhood rather than destroy everything. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "We hid our technology and wiped our memories. We returned to Earth and lived as simple people, hoping that future generations would find a better way to use the power we had abandoned." Meanwhile, in space above Earth, Admiral Stone was facing her own choice. The collective fleet was demanding the surrender of all builder technology. Their communications made it clear they viewed humanity as thieves who had somehow gained access to artifacts beyond their understanding. Captain Torres, commanding her own awakened vessel, suggested a different approach. "We could demonstrate our capabilities," she said, through the fleet's consciousness network. "Show them enough of our true power to make them reconsider their position." "That's what we would have done before," Admiral Stone replied. overwhelm them with displays of superior force until they submitted. But fear-based respect is not real respect. It's just delayed rebellion. Through the network, other awakened humans offered their perspectives. Some, like Dr. Rodriguez on Mars, favored a more aggressive response. They argued that the galaxy needed strong leadership to face the coming threat from the Devourers. Others, like Dr. Tanaka on Europa, believed that humanity should reveal its true nature gradually, allowing other species time to adjust to the new reality. But the decision ultimately rested with Sarah Chen as the focal point of the awakened human consciousness. On Earth, Sarah was showing Elder Kethavar the greatest achievement of ancient human civilization, not their weapons or their ability to reshape matter, but their success in creating a truly peaceful galactic community. For nearly 1 million years, we maintained peace among thousands of species, she said. Different forms of life, from gas clouds to crystalline beings to creatures so alien that communication required new forms of mathematics. All living together in harmony. What changed? Kethavar asked. We did, Sarah admitted. Success made us arrogant. We began to believe that our way was the only way. When species developed differently than we expected, we intervened. When they made choices we disagreed with, we overruled them. Slowly, we transformed from gardeners into dictators. The room around them shifted, showing the moment of humanity's great choice. Representatives from across their vast civilization gathered on a station built around a neutron star. The debate lasted for decades. Some argued for reform, for finding ways to use their power more wisely. Others insisted that power itself was the problem. In the end, we chose exile, Sarah said. We chose to start over rather than risk repeating our mistakes. But we also chose to leave safeguards, hidden systems that would awaken if the galaxy faced a threat too great for current civilizations to handle. The Devourers, Kethavar said,